The bullet tore through Quinton Nash's shoulder just as the sun dipped below the Wyoming horizon, painting the dusty streets of Snake River in shades of blood and gold. He stumbled backward against the hitching post, his hand pressing against the wound as warm blood seeped through his fingers. The outlaw who had shot him was already dead, sprawled in the dirt with Quinton's own bullet through his chest. Another senseless gunfight, another scar to add to the collection that mapped his 28 years of survival in this unforgiving land. "Get him inside," Sheriff Martin barked, rushing forward with 2 other men. "He needs a doctor." "Doctor's still 3 towns over tending to that mining accident," someone shouted back. "Then get Miss Diana. She is the closest thing we have." Quinton tried to protest as they half carried, half dragged him down the street, but the world was already tilting sideways. His boots scraped trails in the dirt as consciousness threatened to slip away. Through the haze of pain, he heard a door opening and felt himself being lowered onto something soft. A bed, maybe. Everything smelled like lavender and clean linen, so different from the iron tang of blood filling his nostrils. "Put him here. Gently." The voice was female, calm despite the urgency of the situation. "I will need hot water, clean cloths, and the whiskey from the cabinet." Quinton forced his eyes open and saw her for the first time. Diana Lawson stood over him, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, wisps escaping to frame a face that was neither classically beautiful nor plain, but something more interesting. Her eyes were the color of creek water in spring, green with flecks of gold, and they assessed him with a clinical detachment that somehow made him feel safer than any reassurance could have. "This is going to hurt," she said matter-of-factly, already rolling up her sleeves. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she cut away his shirt. "The bullet went clean through. That is fortunate." "Does not feel fortunate," Quinton managed to rasp out. Her lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "You are still alive and talking." "Trust me, that is fortunate." The next hour was a blur of white-hot agony as Diana cleaned the wound, her hands steady and sure despite the blood. Those hands, Quinton noticed through the pain, were gentle even when they had to be firm. She did not flinch at the gore or the groans he could not quite suppress. She simply worked, efficient and unhurried, speaking to him in that calm voice to keep him conscious. "Tell me your name," she said, threading a needle. "Quinton Nash." "Where are you from, Quinton Nash?" "Texas, originally. Been drifting for years now. Family, all dead. Comanche raid when I was 19. The words came easier through the pain, old wounds that had scarred over but never quite healed. Her hands paused for just a moment, a flicker of something crossing her face. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "I am sorry," she said quietly, and then continued stitching. "This war has taken so much from so many." It was 1876, and the country was still healing from wounds both literal and figurative. The Civil War had ended 11 years ago, but its echoes still reverberated through towns like Snake River. Add to that the continuing conflicts with native tribes as more settlers pushed west, and it seemed like the violence would never end. By the time Diana finished bandaging his shoulder, the sun had fully set, and lamplight cast warm shadows across the small room. Quinton realized they were in her home, a modest house at the edge of town that spoke of careful upkeep and limited means. "You should rest here tonight," Diana said, washing her hands in a basin. The water turned pink. "I will need to check the wound in the morning to make sure infection has not set in." "I have no money to pay you," Quinton admitted. It shamed him, but honesty seemed important with this woman. "I did not ask for payment." "Then why help me?" Diana dried her hands slowly, not looking at him. "Because someone needed help and I could provide it. Do we need more reason than that?" There was a story there, Quinton sensed, pain hiding behind the practical exterior. He had been around enough wounded people to recognize the signs, even when the wounds did not show on the surface. "Thank you," he said simply. She nodded, still not quite meeting his eyes. "Try to sleep. I will be in the next room if you need anything." But sleep did not come easily. The pain in his shoulder was manageable compared to the questions circling through Quinton's mind. Who was Diana Lawson, and why did she live alone in this frontier town? It was unusual for an unmarried woman to maintain her own household without family. And those hands, so skilled at healing, where had she learned such craft? In the next room, Diana sat by her own small fire, hands trembling now that the emergency had passed. She pressed them flat against her knees to still them. Another bleeding man, another desperate fight against death. It never got easier. Even 3 years after she had fled her old life, she had not always been Diana Lawson, frontier healer. Once she had been Diana Louise Morrison, daughter of a respected Philadelphia physician, engaged to a rising young surgeon named Charles Bennett. That life seemed like a distant dream now, something that had happened to someone else entirely. But Charles had been a different man behind closed doors. His hands, which healed others with such skill, had hurt her with equal precision. Bruises hidden under long sleeves, injuries explained away as clumsiness. He had been careful, always careful, until the night he was not. The night she fought back and fled with nothing but the medical knowledge her father had taught her and the clothes on her back. For 3 years she had been running, changing her name in each new town, always moving west towards some undefined freedom. Snake River, Wyoming had seemed as good a place as any to stop, at least for a while. The town needed someone with medical knowledge, and she needed somewhere to be invisible. Until tonight, when Quinton Nash had been carried bleeding through her door, and she had felt that old pull toward healing. It was the one thing she could not run from, the calling that had been bred into her bones by a father who had genuinely believed medicine was about helping people, not hurting them. She looked down at her hands, finally steady again. Gentle hands, her father had called them. Capable of great tenderness. She wondered what he would think of her now, hiding under a false name in a lawless town at the edge of civilization. The next morning, Quinton woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the smell of coffee brewing. His shoulder throbbed with a deep, bruising ache, but the sharp agony of yesterday had dulled. He sat up carefully, testing his range of motion. Diana appeared in the doorway, carrying a cup. "Coffee," she said, setting it on the bedside table, "and breakfast will be ready shortly." "Let me see that wound." She was all business again this morning, that clinical mask firmly in place. But as her hands unwrapped the bandage and checked the stitches, Quinton noticed the purple shadows under her eyes. She had not slept well either. "It looks good," Diana pronounced. "No signs of infection. You were lucky." "Seems to be my day for luck, meeting you." Something flickered in her expression. "Or perhaps my day, meeting someone who lets me help without asking too many questions." "I have questions," Quinton admitted. "But I figure you will answer them if and when you are ready." Her hand stilled on the fresh bandage. "That's simple. That's simple." Diana finished her work in silence, but some of the tension had left her shoulders. "You can stay another day or two until you are stronger. But you should know that I prefer to keep to myself. I do not gossip with the other townspeople, and I would appreciate it if you did not either." "About you or about me?" "Both, I suppose," Quinton nodded slowly. "Sounds like we both have things we would rather leave in the past." "Most people out here do. That is why they came west." Over the next 3 days, an odd sort of companionship developed between them. Diana tended his wound twice daily, and Quinton helped with small chores around the house, despite her protests. He could not do much with one arm in a sling, but he could fetch water and chop kindling and fix the loose board on her front step. They spoke in fragments, revealing themselves in small pieces. Quinton told her about growing up on a Texas ranch, about finding his family dead when he returned from taking cattle to market, about the years he had spent drifting after that, taking whatever work came his way, trying to outrun ghosts. Diana shared less, but enough. She had come from back east, she admitted, had studied medicine informally through her father, was not welcome to return to her old life for reasons she did not elaborate on. "Sometimes running is the only choice," she said one evening, changing his bandage, "even when it feels like cowardice." Running from what? Her hands tensed. From someone who believed that ownership and love were the same thing. Quinton understood then. He had seen enough in his travels to know what she was not saying. "He put hands on you." "Yes." One quiet word, barely audible. "You got away." "I did." "Good." Quinton caught her wrist gently, stopping her nervous fidgeting with the bandage. "For what it is worth, that took more courage than staying ever could have." Diana looked up at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them. Recognition of a kindred spirit, maybe. Two people who had been broken by different circumstances, but were still trying to piece themselves back together. "I should go," Quinton said on the fourth morning. His shoulder was healing well, and he had already imposed on her hospitality too long. "I have taken enough of your time." But Diana hesitated, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "Where will you go?" "I was planning to head north toward Montana. Heard there is ranch work up there." "And if there is not," he shrugged, then winced as the motion pulled his shoulder. "Then I will keep drifting. It is what I do." "What if you stayed?" The words came out rushed, as if she was surprised to hear herself saying them. "Here, I mean, in Snake River. The town could use a good man who knows how to handle himself, and I could use—" She trailed off and Quinton finished for her. "Could use what?" "Someone who understands," Diana said quietly. "About running, about healing, about trying to become someone new in a place where the past cannot reach you." Quinton looked at her across the small kitchen table, this woman with her careful walls and gentle hands. He had been alone for so long, trusting no one, connecting with no one. It was safer that way, easier. But safe and easy had not made him happy. "What would I do here?" he asked, not quite agreeing but not refusing either. "There is a ranch outside town, the Double Bar Ranch. I heard they are looking for hands, or you could work with the sheriff. Martin is getting older, could use a deputy. And when someone from your past comes looking for you, or when my past catches up, because it always does eventually." Diana met his eyes steadily. "Then we face it together instead of alone." It was madness, forming an attachment after less than a week. But there was something about this woman that called to the broken parts of Quinton that he had tried so hard to bury. She saw him, the real him, underneath the drifter and the gunfighter, and did not flinch away. "All right," he heard himself say. "I will stay. For a while at least." The smile that broke across Diana's face was like sunrise, transforming her entire countenance. It was the first real, unguarded expression he had seen from her, and it made something in his chest tighten. "Thank you," she said simply. The Double Bar Ranch did indeed need hands, and the owner, a gruff older man named Tom Carson, was willing to give Quinton a chance despite his injured shoulder. "You come recommended by Miss Diana," Carson said, "and that is good enough for me. She has a way of judging character." The work was hard but honest, and Quinton found himself settling into the rhythm of ranch life more easily than he had expected. He had grown up with horses and cattle, and those skills came back quickly. His shoulder healed slowly, sometimes aching on cold mornings, but Diana's careful stitching had ensured it mended cleanly. He saw her most evenings, stopping by after work to have dinner or just talk. It became a routine they both looked forward to, those quiet hours when the walls came down a little more each day. "Tell me about your family," Diana asked one night as they sat on her porch watching the stars emerge. Not how they died, but how they lived. So Quinton told her about his mother's laugh, loud and infectious. About his father's patient teaching, showing him how to read the weather and the land. About his younger sister Mary, who had wanted to be a teacher and had practiced by reading to the ranch hands every evening. "They sound wonderful," Diana said softly. "They were. I spent years angry that they were taken, but lately I have been trying to remember them with gratitude instead, that I got to have them at all, even if not for long enough." Diana was quiet for a long moment. "My father was a good man," she said finally. "He taught me that medicine was about compassion, not just knowledge, that the best physicians were the ones who saw patients as people, not just problems to solve. Is he still alive? I do not know. I have not written since I left. It is safer for him if no one can connect us." Her voice caught. "But I hope so. I hope he knows I am all right." "Maybe someday you can tell him," Quinton said, "when enough time has passed that it is safe. Maybe, if Charles stops looking." It was the first time she had spoken her former fiancé's name aloud. Quinton did not press for more, just sat beside her in comfortable silence as the night deepened around them. Summer turned to fall, and Quinton found himself unable to imagine leaving. The work at the double bar was satisfying, the mountains surrounding Snake River were beautiful, and Diana had become essential somehow. Not just someone he visited, but someone he needed to see, to talk to be near. He was falling in love with her. The realization came one October morning as he watched her tend to a child who had fallen and scraped her knee. The way she knelt in the dirt, heedless of her skirt, speaking gently to the crying girl. The way her hands cleaned and bandaged with such care, turning a frightening injury into something manageable. Those gentle hands. They haunted his dreams, both waking and sleeping. But Quinton had no idea how Diana felt. She had been hurt badly by someone who had claimed to love her. The last thing he wanted was to push too hard, too fast, and send her running again. So he waited and he helped, and he tried to show through actions what he was not sure he could say with words. He fixed things around her house. He brought her supplies when he went into town. He made sure everyone knew to leave her be, that she preferred her privacy, and that was to be respected. It was Diana who finally broke the careful distance between them. It happened on a cold November evening when the first real snow of the season was falling. Quinton had stopped by as usual, and they were sitting by her fire, talking about nothing in particular. Diana was mending a shirt and he was cleaning his gun, and it was all very domestic and comfortable. "Quinton," Diana said suddenly, setting down her sewing, "why did you really stay?" He looked up, surprised by the question. "You asked me to. But why did you say yes? You had plans, places to go. Why stay in Snake River for a woman you barely knew?" Quinton set the gun aside carefully. This felt important, like a moment balanced on a knife's edge. "Because you understood," he said honestly. "Because when you looked at me, you did not see a drifter or a gunfighter or someone to be afraid of. You just saw someone who needed help, and you helped. No judgment, no questions beyond what you needed to know to patch me up. That is all. No." He took a breath. "Because you were brave enough to ask me to stay, and I thought maybe that meant you were willing to let someone see the real you, and I wanted to be that someone." Diana's hands were trembling again, but this time not from fear or exhaustion. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I know. Charles said he loved me. He said it while he was hurting me. I am not him. I know that too. In my head I know it, but my heart is still scared." Quinton moved from his chair to kneel in front of her, close enough to touch but not touching. "Then let me prove it." Not with words, but with time, with patience, with all the days I can show you that love does not have to hurt. What if I can never give you what you want? What if I am too broken? You are not broken, Diana. You are healing. There is a difference. He held out his hand, palm up, an offering. And I am healing too. Maybe we could heal together. She looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment, then slowly placed her own hand in his. Her palm was warm, calloused from work but still gentle. He closed his fingers carefully around hers, a promise of protection without possession. I will heal your wounds if you heal mine, Diana said softly, and there were tears in her eyes. Deal, Quinton said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. They sat like that for a long time, hands joined, the fire crackling beside them and snow falling soft outside the window. It was not a dramatic moment or a grand declaration, but something quieter and perhaps more profound. Two wounded people choosing to trust each other, choosing to try. The courtship that followed was slow and careful, both of them learning what it meant to be vulnerable again. Quinton came to understand the little things that made Diana tense, sudden movements or raised voices or unexpected touches. He learned to telegraph his intentions, to ask before acting, to give her space when she needed it. Diana learned that Quinton meant what he said about patience. He never pushed, never demanded more than she could give. When she pulled away, he let her go without complaint. When she reached out, he was there. Steady, reliable, safe. It was she who kissed him first, one December evening when they were walking back from the church Christmas social. The snow was falling again, big fluffy flakes that caught in her hair and made her laugh. Quinton had said something foolish. She could not even remember what, and she had looked at him standing there in the lamplight with snowflakes on his shoulders and that crooked smile on his face, and suddenly she just needed to kiss him. So she did. She grabbed his coat front and pulled him down and kissed him right there in the middle of the street, in full view of anyone who might be looking. Quinton froze for half a second, surprised, then kissed her back with a tenderness that made her want to cry. His good hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone, and everything was gentle and sweet and perfect. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinton was staring at her with wonder in his eyes. What was that for? For being you, Diana said. For staying. For keeping your promise. Which promise? To help me heal. His smile was brilliant. I think you are doing that on your own. I am just lucky enough to witness it. No, Diana said firmly. Not on my own, with you, together. Winter deepened, and with it their relationship. They were the talk of Snake River, the mysterious Eastern woman and the drifter who had stayed. But neither cared much what the gossip said. They had found something precious in each other, and they were not about to let small-minded chatter ruin it. Quinton moved into Diana's house after the new year, once it was clear he was spending every evening there anyway. It made sense practically, with winter so harsh, but it also felt right. Coming home to her each night, falling asleep beside her, waking to her face each morning. These simple intimacies meant more to him than all the grand adventures of his wandering years. Diana loved having him there, filling her small house with his presence. She loved watching him shave in the morning, the careful scrape of razor across jaw. Loved the way he read to her in the evenings, his voice low and soothing. Loved most of all the way he touched her like she was precious and strong simultaneously, neither fragile victim nor cold stone but simply herself, complex and whole. It was not always easy. She had nightmares sometimes, waking in a panic with Charles's face looming in her memory. Quinton learned to wake her gently, speaking her name until she surfaced from sleep and remembered where she was, who she was with. He never took offense when she needed space, never made her feel guilty for the lingering trauma, and Quinton had his own demons. There were days when the weight of all he had lost pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. Days when the violence he had witnessed, the things he had done to survive, felt like stains that would never wash clean. Diana held him through those times, her gentle hands anchoring him to the present, reminding him that the past did not have to define the future. "You are a good man," she told him one night when he was particularly low. "I know you do not always believe it, but you are a good man who has survived bad things. That does not make you bad. How can you be so sure? Because I see how you treat people, how you treat me. Good men are not defined by never making mistakes. They are defined by what they do after, by whether they learn and grow and try to be better." She kissed his temple. "You are trying every day. That is what matters." Spring came late to Wyoming that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought new beginnings. Quinton had been in Snake River for almost a year now, the longest he had stayed anywhere since his family died. The Double Bar Ranch had become more than just a job. Tom Carson treated him like a son, teaching him the business end of ranching and hinting that there might be a foreman position in his future. And Diana's healing practice had grown as people realized she would not pry into their pasts or judge them for their secrets. She was just there to help, to heal, to offer care without questions. It brought her deep satisfaction, using her skills in the way her father had always intended, for compassion rather than control. One warm May evening, Quinton took Diana out to a meadow beyond town where wildflowers were blooming in riotous profusion. He had packed a picnic dinner, and they ate while watching the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Diana," Quinton said when the meal was finished and they were lying in the grass watching stars emerge, "I have something to ask you." She turned her head to look at him. "What is it?" He sat up, suddenly nervous in a way he had not been since that first night she tended his wounds. "I know we have not been together long in the grand scheme of things, less than a year, and I know you have reasons to be cautious about promising your life to someone again." Diana sat up too, her heart beginning to pound. "Quinton, but I love you," he continued. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes. The thought of losing you, of this ending, of going back to being alone. I do not want that. I want this, you and me, for as long as we both live." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple gold band. Not fancy, but beautiful in its simplicity. "I want to marry you, Diana Lawson. I want to build a life with you here in Snake River. I want to raise children with you and grow old with you and keep healing each other's wounds for however many years we are given. Will you marry me?" Diana stared at the ring, emotions warring across her face, fear, hope, longing, all mixed together. "I was married before," she said quietly. "Or engaged legally, to Charles. What if he finds me? What if he tries to say I am still promised to him?" "Then we will deal with it together," Quinton said firmly. "You are not that person anymore, Diana. You are not Diana Morrison from Philadelphia. You are Diana Lawson from Snake River, Wyoming. And soon, if you say yes, you will be Diana Nash. A new name for a new life, one you chose instead of having it forced on you. You would fight for me, even knowing the trouble it could bring." "I would fight heaven and hell for you," Quinton said simply, "but I am hoping it will not come to that, hoping he has given up and moved on. Hoping we can just be happy together without the past interfering." Diana looked from the ring to his face, seeing nothing but love and sincerity in his eyes. This was not Charles, who had promised forever while planning to cage her. This was Quinton, who had spent months showing her that love could be gentle and partnership could be equal. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes, I will marry you." The joy that lit Quinton's face was worth every moment of fear. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, then kissed her with all the love he had been holding back. Diana kissed him back, tasting salt and realizing she was crying. Happy tears this time, joyful ones. They married on a warm June day in 1877 in the small church in Snake River with half the town in attendance. Diana wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, and Quinton wore his best suit, newly purchased for the occasion. They spoke their vows clearly, both of them meaning every word. I, Quinton Nash, take you, Diana Lawson, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, to honor you, to protect you without controlling you, to support your dreams while building our own together. I promise to heal your wounds as you heal mine, for as long as we both shall live. I, Diana Lawson, take you, Quinton Nash, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, to honor you, to trust you even when trust is hard, to build a life with you based on respect and partnership. I promise to heal your wounds as you heal mine, for as long as we both shall live. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was chaste enough for public consumption, but still held the promise of the private life they would build together. The reception was held at the town hall, with food and dancing and toasts to the happy couple. Tom Carson gave a speech about how Quinton was the best hand he had ever hired, and how he was glad to be gaining Diana as a neighbor and friend. Sheriff Martin told an embarrassing story about the first time he had met Quinton, bleeding and belligerent. Diana's few friends from town offered their own blessings. It was perfect, Diana thought as she danced with her husband under the lantern light. This was what she had dreamed of when she was young and naive, before Charles had taught her that dreams could turn to nightmares. But Quinton was giving her the dream back, showing her that it had been real all along, just not with the right person. Happy, Quinton murmured in her ear as they swayed to the music. Happier than I thought possible, Diana admitted. You have given me back so much, Quinton. Hope, trust, the ability to imagine a future. You gave me the same, he said. You gave me a home, a purpose, a reason to stop running. You healed wounds I did not even know I had. They stayed at the dance until late, then walked home through streets lit by moonlight. They're home now, together. It felt momentous and ordinary all at once, this beginning of their married life. The months that followed were the happiest either of them had known in years. They fell into an easy rhythm of shared life, Quinton working at the ranch while Diana tended to the sick and injured. In the evenings they would cook together, raid together, talk about their days and their dreams and their plans for the future. Diana found herself blooming under the steady warmth of Quinton's love. The nightmares came less frequently, and when they did, he was there to comfort her. The reflexive flinch at unexpected touch faded gradually. She was learning to trust not just him but herself, her own judgment, her own strength. Quinton, too, was changing, softening in the best possible way. The hard edges that years of drifting and violence had honed in him began to smooth. He laughed more, worried less, allowed himself to be vulnerable in ways he never had before. Diana had given him permission to be more than just a survivor. She had shown him he could be happy. In the fall of 1877, Diana realized she was pregnant. The signs were unmistakable, the nausea and fatigue and the distinct absence of her monthly courses. She sat with the knowledge for a few days, getting used to the idea before telling Quinton. When she finally did, over dinner one evening, he looked at her with such wonder that she started crying. "Are you sure?" he asked, coming around the table to kneel beside her chair. "As sure as I can be. I estimate the baby will come in late March or early April, a spring baby." Quinton placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our child." "Diana, I cannot even put into words how this makes me feel. Happy, I hope. Happy does not even begin to cover it. Terrified, awed, grateful, excited, all of it at once. He kissed her softly. "Thank you for giving me this, for trusting me with this." Diana covered his hand with her own. "I am scared too," she admitted. "Childbirth is dangerous and I have seen too many women die from it, but I am also happy. So happy, Quinton. I want this baby, want our family." "Then we will face the fear together and focus on the joy," Quinton said. "Same as everything else." The pregnancy progressed normally through the fall and into winter. Diana continued her healing work as long as she was able, then reluctantly scaled back as she grew larger and more tired. Quinton fussed over her constantly, which she found both endearing and occasionally annoying. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one day when he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I know, I just want to help. Want to make sure you and the baby are safe." Diana softened, seeing the real worry in his eyes. "We are safe. You have made us safe. But I need to stay active too, need to keep doing things. I cannot just sit and grow for 6 months." So they compromised. Diana did what she felt comfortable doing, and Quinton helped without hovering too obviously. It worked, mostly, and they both felt better for having communicated openly about their needs and fears. Winter was hard that year, bitterly cold with deep snows that kept everyone housebound for weeks at a time. But Diana and Quinton were content in their small home, preparing for the baby's arrival. They turned the spare room into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and building a cradle from scratch. Diana sewed tiny clothes and blankets while Quinton carved a mobile of wooden horses to hang above the crib. "Boy or girl, what do you hope for?" Diana asked one evening as they worked on the nursery together. Quinton considered. "I honestly do not care, as long as you are both healthy. But I suppose a son would be nice. Someone to teach ranching to pass on what I know. And if it is a daughter, then I will teach her ranching too if she wants to learn, or whatever else she dreams of doing," he smiled. "Times are changing, Diana. Women are doing more than they used to. By the time our child is grown, who knows what will be possible?" Diana felt a surge of love for this man who was so different from the one she had almost married. Quinton truly saw her as an equal, truly believed their children should be free to find their own paths. It made her feel safe in a way nothing else could. In early March, just as the snow was beginning to melt, their past caught up with them. Diana was at home alone, Quinton having gone into town for supplies when there was a knock at the door. She opened it expecting a neighbor and found instead a stranger. He was well dressed in Eastern clothes, out of place in rough Snake River, with cold eyes and a harder mouth. "May I help you?" Diana asked, already feeling the first stirrings of unease. "I am looking for Diana Morrison," the man said. "I was told she might be found here." Diana's blood ran cold. "I am afraid you have the wrong person. My name is Diana Nash." "Is it now?" The man's smile was unpleasant. "Dr. Charles Bennett sent me to find his fiancée. He has been searching for 3 years, and he has finally tracked her to this wretched little town. He wants you to come home, Diana, to fulfill your promise to marry him." "I am already married," Diana said, trying to keep her voice steady. "To another man. Whatever I was to Charles Bennett is in the past. Please leave." She tried to close the door, but the man stuck his foot in the gap. "Dr. Bennett will not be pleased to hear you have been unfaithful. He may need to come here himself to collect you." I said leave. Diana was genuinely frightened now. Her pregnancy made her slow, vulnerable, and Quinton was gone. "Is there a problem here?" Both Diana and the stranger turned to see Sheriff Martin approaching, hand resting casually on his gun belt. Behind him were 2 other men from town, attracted by the raised voices. "No problem, Sheriff," the stranger said smoothly. "Just looking for someone. but it seems I was misinformed about her location. Then I suggest you move along, Martin said, and do not come back. We look after our own in Snake River. The stranger looked between Diana's frightened face and the sheriff's stern one, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he tipped his hat mockingly. Good day, then. I will let Dr. Bennett know his fiancée could not be found here. But the emphasis on the word fiancé was unmistakable, a threat thinly veiled as courtesy. After he left, Sheriff Martin came inside with Diana, making sure she was all right. That man is trouble, he said bluntly. I do not like the look of him. You want to tell me what that was about? So Diana did, haltingly, explaining about Charles and her flight from Philadelphia. The sheriff listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing grimmer. Well, he has no legal standing here, Martin said when she finished. You are married to Quinton in the eyes of God and Wyoming law. But I suspect this Charles Bennett might not care much about legalities if he is as controlling as you say. What should I do? Tell Quinton when he gets home, and be cautious for a while. Do not go anywhere alone. I will have the boys keep an eye on your place, make sure no one is lurking about. When Quinton returned and heard what had happened, his face went hard in a way Diana had never seen. He sent someone here, to our home, while you are carrying our child. Quinton, please do not do anything rash. I just want this to go away. So do I, but we have to face the possibility that it might not, that this Charles might actually come here, might try to take you. Quinton took her hands. I will not let that happen. Do you understand me? I will not let anyone hurt you ever again. I know you mean that, but Charles is rich, powerful, he has connections. We are just two people in a small town. We are two people with a whole town backing us, Quinton corrected. You heard the sheriff. We look after our own. And you are one of us now, have been since you stayed and helped people without asking for anything in return. Snake River protects its own. Diana wanted to believe him, but fear had its hooks in her now. She had been so close to feeling safe, to believing her past was truly behind her. And now this threat, hanging over them like a storm about to break. The next weeks were tense. Diana rarely left the house, and when she did, Quinton or someone else from town was always with her. The baby inside her grew, active and strong, oblivious to the danger potentially gathering. Then, in late March, when Diana was 9 months pregnant and moving awkwardly under the weight of her belly, Charles Bennett came to Snake River. He arrived in a fancy carriage with 2 hired men, pulling up in front of Diana and Quinton's house like he owned it. Quinton was home, thankfully, and he stepped out onto the porch before Charles could knock. You are not welcome here, Quinton said flatly. Charles was handsome in a polished way. Diana could see through the window. Everything she had once found attractive, the refined manners and expensive clothes and cultured accent. Now she saw only danger wearing a pleasant mask. I am here to collect my fiancée, Charles said smoothly. I understand she has been living here under a false name, confused and frightened. But I am prepared to forgive her momentary lapse in judgment and take her home where she belongs. She is not your fiancée. She is my wife. A marriage performed under a false name is not legally binding, Charles said. Diana Morrison is promised to me, and I have the documents to prove it. By now, people were gathering. Word had spread quickly that the Eastern doctor had come for Diana, and the townsfolk were turning out to see what would happen. Sheriff Martin pushed through the crowd. Dr. Bennett, I presume, Martin said. You need to leave Snake River. Now. I am not leaving without what belongs to me, Charles said, and now some of the pleasant mask slipped, revealing the iron will underneath. Nobody here belongs to you, Quinton said, stepping down from the porch. He was not wearing his gun, but several men in the crowd were, their hands resting meaningfully on their holsters. Diana, Charles called past him. Come out here. We can discuss this rationally." Diana appeared in the doorway, one hand braced on her lower back, heavily pregnant and afraid but determined. "I am not going with you, Charles. I am married to Quinton. I am carrying his child. I am staying here." Charles's face went ugly, rage replacing the careful politeness. "You whore. You let this nobody touch you. You were supposed to be mine, you were promised to me." "Promises made under duress are not binding," Diana said, her voice shaking but clear. "You hurt me, Charles. You hurt me repeatedly, and I ran because it was the only way to survive. I am not coming back to that." "I never hurt you. I corrected you when you were difficult, that is all, for your own good." "You broke my ribs," Diana said loudly, wanting everyone to hear. "You gave me black eyes and bruises I had to hide. You convinced me it was my fault, that I provoked you, but it was not. It was never my fault. You were cruel, and I was right to run." The crowd was muttering now, the mood turning decidedly hostile toward Charles. In a frontier town where women were scarce and valued, a man who admitted to beating one was lower than dirt. "You are making this up," Charles said, but he looked unsettled by the crowd's reaction. "You are hysterical." "She is not the one who seems hysterical right now," Sheriff Martin said. "I think you had better leave, Dr. Bennett, before this gets ugly. I have legal rights to her." "Not in Wyoming, you do not. She is Diana Nash, married to Quinton Nash, residing in Snake River. Whatever claims you think you have from Pennsylvania do not apply here." Charles looked around at the hostile faces, at the men with guns, at Quinton standing protectively in front of the door. He was outnumbered and outmaneuvered, and he knew it. "This is not over," he said finally. "I will take this to the courts. I will prove she is promised to me." "You try that," Martin said. "In the meantime, I am ordering you to leave my town and not come back. You have until sunset to be gone, or I will arrest you for harassment and disturbing the peace." For a long moment, Charles just stared at Diana, and she saw in his eyes a hatred so pure it made her breath catch. This was the real man underneath the doctor's polite exterior, the one she had glimpsed in unguarded moments. This was who he had always been, but she was not alone anymore. She had Quinton, and she had an entire town standing between her and this monster. "You will regret this," Charles said quietly, just for her. Then he turned and climbed back into his carriage, snapping at his hired men to drive. They left in a cloud of dust, and Diana felt her knees give out. Quinton caught her before she fell, sweeping her up carefully despite her weight. "I've got you. You are safe. He is gone." "He will come back," Diana whispered, "or he will find some legal way to hurt us. Men like Charles do not just give up." "Then we will deal with it," Quinton said firmly. "But right now you need to rest, you and the baby." The doctor, who rode circuit through Snake River, said Diana's labor was likely brought on early by the stress. She started having contractions that evening, long before they expected the baby to come. Quinton sent for every woman in town who had experience with childbirth, turning their home into an organized chaos of boiling water and clean linens. Diana had attended dozens of births in her time as a healer, but experiencing it from the inside was entirely different. The pain was immense, wave after wave of cramping agony that made her cry out despite her best efforts to stay quiet. She gripped Quinton's hand hard enough to leave bruises, but he never flinched, never left her side. "You can do this," he murmured over and over. "You are the strongest person I know. You can do this." "I am scared," Diana gasped between contractions. "Quinton, I am so scared." "I know, love, but you are not alone. I am right here." The labor lasted through the night and into the next day. Long, exhausting, painful hours where Diana wondered if she would survive, if the baby would survive. But finally, as afternoon sun streamed through the windows, she felt the irresistible urge to push. "That is it. Mrs. Carson, the ranch owner's wife, encouraged from the foot of the bed. "The baby is crowning. Just a little more, Diana." Diana pushed with everything she had, feeling like she was being torn apart. But then suddenly there was release and the sound of a baby crying, lusty and strong. "It is a boy," Mrs. Carson announced, holding up the squirming infant. "A fine, healthy boy." Quinton was crying openly as Mrs. Carson placed the cleaned baby in Diana's arms. Their son, red-faced and angry at being born, his tiny fists waving. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. "Hello, little one," Diana whispered, exhausted and elated and overcome. "We are your parents. We are going to love you so much." "What should we name him?" Quinton asked, one finger gently touching their son's soft hair. Diana looked up at her husband, this man who had saved her in so many ways. "How about Daniel? Daniel Nash, Daniel," Quinton repeated. "I like that. Hello, Daniel. Welcome to the world." The baby's eyes opened, unfocused but searching, and Diana felt her heart break open in a new way. This tiny person depending on them completely, trusting them to keep him safe and loved. It was terrifying and wonderful all at once. The women cleaned Diana up and made sure she was comfortable, then left the new family alone together. Quinton lay down carefully beside Diana on the bed, the baby between them, and they just stared at their son in wonder. "We made him," Diana said softly. "This perfect little person. From our love." "Best thing I ever did," Quinton agreed. "You and him, you are my whole world now." Diana wanted to stay in this moment forever, this bubble of perfect happiness, but reality intruded too soon. By the next morning, as she was recovering and learning to nurse Daniel, Sheriff Martin arrived with news. "Charles Bennett filed papers in Cheyenne," he said grimly, "claiming Diana is his legal fiancée and that her marriage to Quinton is invalid. He is seeking an injunction to force her to return to Pennsylvania with him." Diana felt sick. "Can he do that? Can he actually force me to go?" "Not if I have anything to say about it," Martin replied. "But he has lawyers, expensive ones. And they are arguing that since you were engaged to him first and never formally broke the engagement, you were not free to marry Quinton." "That is insane," Quinton said. "She ran from him because he was abusing her. That breaks any supposed engagement." "You and I know that, but proving it in court is another matter. It is your word against his, and he is a respected doctor from a good family." "So what do we do?" Diana asked, fighting back tears. She was exhausted from childbirth, hormonal, terrified. She could not lose her family, not now. "We fight," Martin said simply. "We get our own lawyer, we tell your story, we bring witnesses who can testify to your character and your marriage, and we trust that Wyoming justice is different from Eastern justice, that a woman's right to choose her own life matters here." It was a battle that lasted months. Charles's lawyers filed motion after motion, trying to get a judgment in their favor. But Diana and Quinton had their own lawyer now, a sharp woman named Margaret Reed from Cheyenne who specialized in defending women's rights. She was expensive, more than they could really afford, but the whole town pitched in to help pay her fees, because that was what community meant in a place like Snake River. You looked after your own. Margaret built a case that was about more than just Diana and Charles. She argued that a woman who fled abuse had every right to start a new life, that engagement was not ownership, that Diana's marriage to Quinton was legal under Wyoming law and should be respected. She found witnesses too. Other women Charles had courted or treated, who came forward to speak about his controlling behavior. A nurse who had worked with him and seen him deliberately hurt patients who annoyed him. His mask of respectability began to crack under scrutiny. The case finally came to trial in August of 1878 at the courthouse in Cheyenne. Diana had to bring Daniel, still nursing, and Quinton took time off from the ranch to be there every day. Half of Snake River showed up to support them, filling the courtroom and the streets outside. Diana testified about the abuse, about her flight, about building a new life in Wyoming. It was humiliating to have her trauma examined and questioned, but she forced herself to be honest and detailed. Let them see what Charles had done to her. Charles testified too, painting Diana as unstable and irrational, claiming he had only ever tried to help her. But Margaret Reed Cross examined him brilliantly, getting him to admit to things that undermined his whole testimony. His temper showed through several times, giving the judge a glimpse of the real man. In the end, after 2 weeks of testimony and arguments, the judge ruled in Diana's favor. He declared that she had been right to flee an abusive situation, that her engagement to Charles Bennett was nullified by his actions, and that her marriage to Quinton Nash was legal and binding. Charles was ordered to stop harassing her and to pay court costs. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Diana collapsed into Quinton's arms, sobbing with relief. They had won. They were truly free, legally and finally. Charles left Cheyenne that day and was never heard from again. Years later, they heard through random channels that he had moved to California and married someone else. Diana hoped that woman fared better than she had, but mostly she just felt grateful it was over. Life returned to normal, or at least their version of normal. Daniel grew from a baby into a toddler, curious and energetic and adored by his parents. Quinton took the foreman position at Double Bar Ranch, and Diana continued her healing work, though more sporadically now that she had a child to care for. They were happy, genuinely happy in a way neither had imagined possible during their darker times. When Daniel was 3, Diana became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, with no past traumas resurfacing to complicate it. She gave birth to a daughter in spring of 1881, whom they named Ruth after Quinton's mother. Ruth was a placid baby, the opposite of her brother's intensity. She rarely cried and seemed content to observe the world with solemn dark eyes. Diana loved her fierce maternal love already familiar from Daniel, but somehow also completely new. Their family felt complete. 2 healthy children, a home they had built together, work they found meaningful, and a community that accepted them. It was everything they had needed to heal. One evening when Daniel was 5 and Ruth was 2, the family was sitting together on their porch watching the sunset. Daniel was chattering about something that had happened at school while Ruth dozed in Diana's lap. Quinton had his arm around Diana's shoulders, and she was leaning into his warmth. "Happy?" Quinton asked softly, echoing the question from their wedding night years ago. Diana smiled. "Happier than I ever thought possible. You gave me everything, Quinton. A home, children, safety, love. You healed wounds I thought would never close." "You did the same for me," Quinton said. "I was so lost when I came here, running from everything. And you showed me it was okay to stop running, to put down roots, to let myself love again." "We healed each other," Diana said. "Just like I told you that first night, I would heal your wounds if you healed mine." And we did. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Daniel chase fireflies in the yard and listening to Ruth's soft breathing. The mountains around Snake River glowed pink in the sunset, and somewhere a coyote howled its evening song. This was peace, Diana thought. This was happiness. Not the absence of pain or difficulty, but the presence of love strong enough to weather any storm. The years continued to pass, kind and gentle. Quinton eventually became part owner of Double Bar Ranch when Tom Carson decided to retire. Diana trained a young woman from town in basic medicine, passing on her father's knowledge to another generation. Daniel grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch and wanted to be like his father. Ruth showed an early talent for drawing and spent hours sketching everything around her. When Diana was 35, she received a letter that had been years in finding her. It was from her father's lawyer, informing her that her father had passed away peacefully in his sleep. He had left her his entire estate with a note that said simply, "For my daughter, wherever she may be. I hope she found the happiness she was seeking." Diana wept for days, mourning the father she had loved and the years they had lost. But she was also grateful. Grateful he had understood why she ran, even if he never knew where. Grateful he had wanted her to be happy more than he had wanted her to fulfill societal expectations. She donated most of the inheritance to establish a medical clinic in Snake River, one that could serve people regardless of their ability to pay. The rest she put aside for Daniel and Ruth's futures, whatever those might hold. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and drought summers, illnesses and injuries, disagreements and difficulties. But Diana and Quinton faced everything together, their partnership stronger for having been forged in adversity. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows in the same church where they had married, surrounded by children and friends and the community they had helped build. They spoke the same words they had spoken before, about healing each other's wounds and building a life together. But now, those words carried 20 years of proof behind them. Daniel was 19 by then, working the ranch alongside his father and courting a girl from a neighboring spread. Ruth was 16, planning to go to Denver to study art. Both children were confident and loved, carrying forward the lessons their parents had taught them about resilience and compassion. As Quinton and Diana stood holding hands at the altar, both graying and lined by years but still deeply in love, they felt the weight of everything they had overcome. The pain they had both carried to Snake River all those years ago was not gone exactly. Those wounds had left scars. But they had healed, truly healed, wrapped in patience and partnership and the gentle care of love. "Thank you," Diana whispered as they kissed to seal the renewal of their vows. "For what?" Quinton asked. "For staying that first time. For choosing me, choosing us every day since. For helping me believe I deserve to be loved gently." "Thank you for healing me," Quinton said. "For teaching me that home is not a place you come from but the people you choose to love." They left the church hand in hand, walking into another Wyoming sunset with their children and their friends around them. The past was behind them, fully and finally. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility. Years later, when they were old and gray and sitting on that same porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard, Diana would look back on her life with wonder. She had run so far, been so broken, believed herself beyond repair. But one bullet through a cowboy's shoulder had changed everything, had brought her the partner she needed to heal. "No regrets?" Quinton asked her once, when they were both in their 70s and their bodies were failing but their love remained strong. "Not a single one," Diana said honestly. "Everything I went through, all the pain and fear, it brought me here. To you, to this life. I would not change any of it, even the bad parts, even those, because they taught me how precious the good parts are." Quinton Nash passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 79, with Diana holding his hand. She mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had been given 35 years together, which was more than either had dared hope for that night she first tended his wounds. Diana lived another 3 years, long enough to see Daniel take over the ranch completely, and Ruth become a renowned artist in Denver. Long enough to meet 10 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. Long enough to feel satisfied that the life she had built meant something, had helped people, had left the world a little better than she had found it. On a warm spring morning in 1912, Diana Lawson Nash passed away quietly in the house she and Quinton had shared for so many years. She was 83 years old, and her last thoughts were of gentle hands tending wounds and a cowboy who had chosen to stay. The town of Snake River mourned her passing. She had been a fixture of the community for 35 years, had brought countless children into the world, had tended the sick and dying with equal compassion. The medical clinic that bore her name would continue her work for generations to come. At her funeral, Daniel spoke about his mother's strength and kindness. Ruth shared stories of her gentleness and wisdom, and the preacher talked about how sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that heal us, that take two broken people and make them whole. They buried Diana next to Quinton in the cemetery overlooking Snake River, their graves side by side for eternity. The headstones were simple, engraved with their names and dates. But someone, probably Ruth, had added an inscription that captured everything they had been to each other. She healed his wounds, he healed hers, and together they healed a community. It was the perfect epitaph for a love born of pain but raised in compassion. For two people who had found each other in the wilderness and built something lasting. For a cowboy and his bride with the gentle hands, who had promised to heal each other and had kept that promise every day of their lives together. The town of Snake River continued on, growing and changing with the times. Wyoming became a state, the Wild West was tamed, progress marched forward. But the story of Diana and Quinton Nash remained, passed down through generations as an example of what love could be when it was based on respect and partnership, and the willingness to heal together. Their children and grandchildren spread across the country, carrying forward the lessons they had learned. That running from pain is sometimes necessary, but healing requires staying still. That love should be gentle, not controlling. That the past does not have to define the future. That two broken people can build something beautiful if they are willing to trust each other. And in the medical clinic Diana had founded, her philosophy of compassionate care continued to guide the doctors and nurses who worked there. They treated patients as people, not problems. They asked about wounds beyond the physical. They understood that healing was about more than just closing injuries. It was about addressing the whole person, body and soul. The Double Bar Ranch, now run by Daniel's grandson, still operated using the principles Quinton had established. Fair treatment of workers, respect for the land, honest dealings with neighbors. The Nash name meant something in Wyoming, stood for integrity and hard work and community spirit. Ruth's art hung in galleries across the country, her paintings of Wyoming landscapes capturing both the harsh beauty and the tender moments of frontier life. Many of her most famous works featured couples, young and old, showing the quiet intimacy of shared lives. She always said she had learned about love from watching her parents, seeing how they cared for each other through everything. The house where Diana and Quinton had raised their family still stood on the edge of Snake River, preserved by the Historical Society as an example of frontier living. Visitors could walk through the rooms where so much love and life had happened, could see the nursery where Daniel and Ruth had been born, the kitchen where countless meals had been shared, the porch where the family had watched so many sunsets together. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was just right, people swore they could feel the presence of those who had lived there. Not ghosts exactly, but memories so strong they had soaked into the very walls. The memory of gentle hands tending wounds, of a cowboy choosing to stay, of two people healing each other one day at a time. The bullet that had torn through Quinton Nash's shoulder in 1876 had changed everything. It had brought him to Diana's door, had started a chain of events that rippled out through decades and generations. One moment of violence transformed into a lifetime of love, because two wounded people had the courage to trust each other with their healing. That was the real legacy of Diana and Quinton Nash. Not their worldly success or their children's accomplishments, though those mattered too, but the simple, profound truth they had lived. That healing is possible, that love can be gentle, that two people willing to stay and do the hard work of being vulnerable can build something lasting and beautiful. Their story became part of the mythology of the American West, told and retold around campfires and dinner tables. Sometimes the details changed in the telling, but the heart of it remained the same. A cowboy and a healer, both broken by their pasts, who found each other in a small Wyoming town and built a love that lasted until death and beyond. And in Snake River itself, where their story began, they were remembered not as legends but as real people who had lived and loved and struggled and triumphed. The town that had protected Diana from her abusive past, that had welcomed Quinton when he chose to stay, took pride in having been part of their story, because that was what community meant in the end. Looking after your own, standing up for what was right, giving people second chances to become who they were meant to be. Diana and Quinton had been given that gift by Snake River, and they had spent their lives paying it forward, helping others in turn. The gentle hands that had first tended a bleeding cowboy had gone on to tend thousands of wounds, physical and otherwise. They had brought new life into the world, had comforted the dying, had healed injuries both visible and hidden. Those hands had been a gift, and Diana had used them well. And the cowboy who had chosen to stay, to put down roots after years of drifting, had been a gift too. His steadiness, his loyalty, his capacity for gentle love despite having witnessed terrible violence. Quinton had shown that strength was not about dominance, but about the courage to be vulnerable, to admit when you needed help, to let yourself be healed. Together, they had been more than the sum of their parts. Two wounded people who created something whole and beautiful and lasting. Their marriage had been a partnership of equals, built on mutual respect and genuine love. They had raised children who went out into the world knowing what healthy love looked like. They had built a community that valued compassion and justice. They had lived lives that mattered. As the 20th century progressed, and the world changed in ways Diana and Quinton could never have imagined, their story remained relevant. Because the need for healing never goes away, and the power of gentle love never diminishes. Every generation has its wounded people, its survivors looking for a safe place to land. And every generation needs examples of what it looks like to heal together, to choose love over fear, to build something good from broken pieces. The bride with the gentle hands and the cowboy who stayed to heal his wounds. It was a simple story in many ways, but simplicity does not mean insignificance. Sometimes the most important truths are the simplest ones. That love can heal, that trust can be rebuilt, that it is never too late to start over and become who you were always meant to be. In the end, that was what Diana and Quinton had done. They had become who they were meant to be, not despite their wounds, but because they had the courage to let those wounds heal properly. And in doing so, they had created a legacy that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes, touching everyone who heard their story and felt hope stirring in their own hearts. The cowboy married the bride with the gentle hands, and she said, "I will heal your wounds if you heal mine." And they did, for all the days of their lives, proving that sometimes the best love stories are the ones where two broken people make each other whole.